things with a lot of water content don't fry well. That's my opinion.
Is now a good time to bring up what happened an hour after I uploaded the episode last week?
I mean, yeah, I think any time is. Also, just to note, I don't know the exciting conclusion to this, so I am just as enthralled and excited as our listeners should be to hear this story.
Right.
So, Nate, why don't you tell us what happened last week?
You more or less know the end of it because we spoke to you about 20 minutes before it ended. So, right. So first off, I would like to state that I'm glad that my wife was working from home that day so I can have someone back this up because I feel like it sounds pretty unbelievable considering the circumstances of what I did that day. So I finished editing our episode on Thursday, probably like 2:00 in the afternoon. Sent it to Will. We briefly texted about it, blah, blah, blah. Haha, this part's funny. And then I uploaded it to our distributor. I don't know what they are exactly.
Yeah, probably.
I did that, and then I was like, cool, well, I've been inside all day. I'm going to take the dog for a walk. And where we live, probably about, 100 meters away from our front door is, I guess it's a park. It's like a city-owned park. There's a playground, but most people go there because it's like a viewing spot. So we live in a part of town where if you get to where there's a clearing, you can really see like a lot of Stockholm. So that attracts a lot of people. There's swings for the kids. There's, if you're a teenager, you want to do some drinking or drugs or smoke cigarettes or whatever, it's a good spot because it's also right by a pretty sizable amount of just trees. I wouldn't say forest because like that implies that it's bigger than it is. So a lot of times in the evenings, you'll see like teens or younger people congregating out there, like whatever. A lot of times you find like beer bottles and shit. And it's at night, it's like, yeah, that's whatever. It's kind of isolated. But in the day, it's a little weird because it's right next to this playground where there's always kids and parents during the day. Walking the dog, and we go to the viewing spot, like the edge of the cliff, and I see a packet of white powder on the ground. A sizable packet. I sent the picture to Will, and he is doubting how much is actually in there. And
my experience with white powder drugs, and most drugs, is TV and movies.
Sure.
So, while you may see a small single-use bag of drugs on TV or movies, more likely it's Breaking Bad or Scarface or Always Sunny, which we had just watched.
Right.
So that's my frame of reference. So when I see some little bag, like, a little bag and a tiny bag, something that would serve 10 people versus 1 people,
right,
it kind of looks the same to me.
Right. Okay, so anyways, I see this bag. It's pretty big. I'm going to guess that it was like an ounce, significant amount of powder.
Right.
So I immediately freak out because I'm like, am I living in that episode of Always Sunny? I just spent so many hours, watching the show, talking to you about it, editing us talking about it. I was like, am I losing my mind?
Did Will somehow come to Sweden and prank me?
Yeah, or like, what's that show? Like, What Would You Do? Wasn't that a show for a while? Maybe it still is, where they put people on like weird situations where it's like a guy being abusive to his girlfriend and it's like hidden cameras.
What would you do?
Hidden cameras on.
It really felt like that. So I just like stand right by it. I like look around. I don't see anybody other than kids at the playground. And like, 2 parents. I'm like, well, I'm not going to touch it because what if this is like a sting or something? Like, you get super paranoid. And since I am now I'm a permanent resident, but I'm still very new to this country. I don't want I'm scared to jaywalk, like I am I'm a very good boy.
Yeah, you don't want to give anyone any reason to take your residency away.
Exactly. So
who knows? You might be on probation. You don't know.
So exactly. So I call my wife, who's at home working, not very far away from me, and she's in a meeting. And so she's like, I don't know what to do. So she asked the people in her meeting, and her producer's like, oh yeah, I've done this before. So you just call the cops. And my first instinct as an American is like, well, absolutely not. We're not calling the cops. Like, it needs to go somewhere else. I don't want to leave it here, but I am not calling the cops. Absolutely not. No way.
Right. Much like the gang, you find yourself in a predicament in which if you leave it where it is, children might find it.
It was literally the moral debate that they had on the show, and then that you and I sort of had with each other. Like, what do you do? So she comes out there, and she's like, yeah, let's just take it to the cops. So she picks it up and puts it in a bag, and I'm just like, I have never had more anxiety in my life.
Yeah, and I'm putting myself in your position because it seems like we have the similar upbringing and a relationship to police, whereas like I wouldn't want my fingerprints on it.
No.
I'm like, I'd be super paranoid.
Right. So it gets in contact with the police. She like fills out a form online, and then they called her, and they're like, yeah, just bring it to the police station. And this is all just like going against everything in my body. Like, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I'm trying to just be like, okay, I'm not from here. Like, you tell me what to do.
Right. But in your heart, you're like, okay, so we're walking around with a bunch of drugs.
With I'm guessing, a felonious amount of drugs.
Right. And then do you walk to the station or do you drive?
Right. So we looked up, the cop was like, this is the closest one to where you live. It's not that close. It's in a weird spot. So we get in the car, which again, I'm just like, this is terrible. Right. Terrible.
Does that make it a new level of crime?
Are we transporting this shit now?
Right.
So we go to the police station that they told my wife to go to. I'm just sitting in the car. I'm not getting out. I'm not talking to anyone, nothing. And it's closed. So we get back in the car, and my wife is like, well, we'll just do this tomorrow. They'll be open tomorrow in the morning. And I'm like, okay, so we're just going to keep this in our apartment. And at that point, I called you.
Right.
Because I'm freaking out at my wife. Like, I shouldn't have. I mean, I was understandably upset by the whole thing, being an American, but I just had to keep telling myself that I am not a born and raised Swede. Like, they know what to do. I don't know what to do. Right.
And that's where I came in, and I think that you and I were having a conversation. You told me the story, and I, appreciated it appropriately. And then I believe we commiserated, and we're on the same side of, oh my God, what if we get stopped while we're walking with this in our possession? Right. And what if you get stopped? What if you get pulled over while you're driving around with it? What if, somehow there's a tip or something? Like, what if, and we have all these what if scenarios in which a cop finds it on you, and to us, that's a huge red flag. That means like you're going to get thrown on the ground and handcuffed and searched, and they're going to find it and they're going to throw you in jail and blah, blah, blah. Whereas your wife was speaking to us like we were crazy people.
Yes, exactly.
Because in her mind, she's like, no, we filled out a form. We spoke to them. We told them we had this. If we get pulled over, we'll just talk to them about it.
Right.
Whereas we don't think of what are the chances of you being like, oh, I swear, officer, it's not mine.
It's not mine. Yeah. What's the first
thing? I'm going to return it to the police. That I'm on my way to the station, but the station was closed.
Right.
Like, to us, that seems like laughable.
Yes. That's like,
because of our experience.
That's like, if you get caught with drugs, I'm assuming you would be panicking, and the first thing you would say is, that's not mine.
Right. I just found that.
I just found this. And she's like, yeah, I mean, we're on speakerphone with Will and I going nuts, and she's just very calmly like, no, we told them we were bringing it. So I'm just like, okay, we'll stop somewhere on the street. I'm going to throw it in a public trash can, and that's it. We're done. And then you brought up the point like, well, then you're just being weird and lying about it. If the cops would be like following up on that and be like, did you drop this off? I'm like, yes, we did.
We have a list of, you found some drugs and you were going to return it to us, but you didn't. So we're just wanting to follow up where that drug bag went. And you're like, oh, I don't know. No, we were just goofing. You either have to say it was a prank and you never had the drugs, or you have to admit that you threw the drugs away, which is then probably a crime.
Right. So yeah, after Will and I'm basically having a panic attack, and Caro's like, okay, let's just get this over with. So she calls back and is like, what is open right now? Where can I bring this? The closest one to us is at Globin, which you have been to Globin. We've played there before. Smack dab in the center of the city. So we're driving in a car at 4:30 p.m., 5 p.m. with a bag of drugs in the car. Eventually we get there. Again, I sit in the car. No fucking way am I going inside. And she just goes in and brings it in. She's like, yeah. They were like, thank you. They said that they would. Well, I felt better when she told me what they said, because she said that they, at most, what they would do is test with the substance to see what it was, and then and that's probably it. Because I'm like, your fingerprints are on that. Like, how is this a good idea? But apparently, yeah, like there's drugs everywhere, so it's like they probably have their hands full, and like someone just turning in drugs is like, oh, okay, let's just see what it was, so we can add
worst case scenario, they were a drug user or a drug dealer, but it's better for them to either of those people to return drugs to the police rather than use or sell them. So
yeah, so my whole thing was like, I don't want to snitch under any circumstances. I don't want anybody to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like there was a huge bag of drugs by the playground, so it's like morally, I felt like it was necessary to get rid of it. But I felt terrible, and I think about it a couple times an hour still, because I feel so torn about it. I wish it hadn't happened, but it did, and it did on the weirdest day for it to possibly happen.
Also, I think it would have been funny if your wife, when returning the drugs and they said that they were going to test it, if she would have like winked or something and been like, oh, I tested it.
Yeah. Oh, it's good.
It's primo.
I mean, it really could have been like a lot of things. It could have been cocaine. It could have been MDMA. It could have been heroin, I guess. Probably not, because it was white. I guess there's white heroin. It could have been like dishwasher detergent.
Yeah, it could have been like a joke, a goof with like some teenagers or something. I went to a friend's party in Brooklyn somewhere, and when I walked in, there was like a mirror laid out on like in the dining room maybe, and there was like a giant pile of white powder, and he was like, yeah, come on in, and do you want to, he's like, I know you don't drink, you want a beer, but he's like, just don't worry about it, because he knew that I didn't drink or smoke or do anything. Yeah. So he was like, oh, don't worry about that. They're just doing some coke, whatever. And I looked over and I was like, okay. And he's like, why are you not laughing? And I was like, I don't know.
No,
he's like,
it was a joke
that
amount?
is a mountain. That is a mountain of flour. He's like, that's a joke. You know that, right? And I was like, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's like $2 million worth of cocaine or something. It was like, apparently it was like, a medium bag of flour they dumped on. And I had no clue, zero frame of reference. But
yeah, like a Scarface amount.
Yeah, it was like more than the Always Sunny amount.
For someone like you, yes, that joke is just not worth it.
I'm not the target demographic for that one.
Anyways.
Again, referencing TV and movies, like that's a normal amount of cocaine to me.
Yeah, exactly. What, don't you buy it by the pound?
Yeah, like, I don't know. I guess you could buy half a pound.
The bottom line is, I guess I did the right thing. It felt terrible the entire time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of It's Always Stockholm in Los Angeles. I am your host, Nate Harold. And I am your co-host, guest voice actor, Will Noon. Today, we are talking about Season 3, Episode 13, The Gang Gets Whacked, Part 2, written by Glenn Howerton, Scott Martyr, and Rob Russell, directed by, guess?
James Franco.
The Shack is back. Matt Shackman.
Nice.
This is obviously the second part of a two-part, very special episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. We start with Dee and Charlie in the back office at Patty's. They've got a pretty decent amount of cocaine on a scale, and they're weighing it. Not really sure why they're weighing it, but Charlie has a great line where he says,
then I guess cocaine is weightless, all right? I'm going to file that up here, actually.
Right.
And he's got the coke all over his hands, so he's cleaning his hands off with his mouth.
He's licking his fingers to clean them.
which is very funny. Kind of like a cat.
Or like a normal ass human that's cleaning the Cheeto dust off their fingers.
Right. Or a highly addictive substance. Dee brings up the fact that they should be careful because of their past addictions. And,
Right. This is great.
And Charlie's like, yeah, but we got over that. And Dee is like, yeah, I got over mine. But you
Got over crack.
Yeah, don't you huff glue all the time? And he was like, no.
It's like, no. It's like, did you huff any glue today? And he just like, he goes through a great series of facial expressions where at first it's like incredulous, and then it's awkward, and then it's just a goofy smile.
It reminds me of that Trump gif where from the debate.
Yeah.
It's really like those exact same in line.
This and a few other moments are when I started to realize that I really do like when Charlie and Dee go on their escapades.
Yes.
Because they are probably I don't know, are they the best actors in on the show?
Right.
I mean, Frank, obviously, Danny DeVito, but like physical, like the faces that they both make are pretty crazy, and like
they're such a good
body
team.
Language is super weird.
And they always do really weird shit. Like it's pretty unique.
They get up to it. Dee has a face later on that I'll mention when they're in her apartment, and it's just amazing. Her face is like rubber.
Frank and Dennis enter the bar. They just made $1,000, and Dennis corrects him to say, "I just made $1,000. You just sat in the car and read a magazine."
Right, because he's doing all the heavy lifting, if you know what I mean.
Frank has taken on the role of being a pimp even more than he did last episode. He's really
leaning into it, yeah.
He's really leaning into it. Every hoe needs a pimp, I believe is what he says. Charlie and Dee come out of the back office and they meet up with those two, and they explain that they went to bingo and bought cocaine with the money they made from selling the pills.
Right. Which, at this point, I thought it was very strange that they had such a great success that why didn't they get more pills and then go back to the jockeys?
Right. It makes for way funnier scenarios, but that is a good point that it's like, why are you going to change horses midstream here, dude?
Yeah. I mean, they just like he killed it. But later on, they sort of discuss something. I think Charlie maybe accuses them of raping the horse.
Right.
So I think maybe that has to do, I don't know. Also, maybe they can't access the country club without Frank. Yeah, maybe there are reasons.
Frank encourages them to go back to bingo and get a gun because dealing drugs is pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Their counter to that is that the cocaine is a rich person's drug. Maybe this is why they changed, because cocaine is a rich person's drug and it's like going to be easier to sell, maybe.
Right. So they don't have to deal with the jockeys of the world. They can just go, straight to it. And I think somewhere around there is when Dennis suggests that they just go downtown to Center City.
Right.
And just, offer it, to some business people walking by. And it's a very sarcastic comment, and Dee and Charlie are confused. And
Are you saying that's not going to work? What are you saying exactly?
I'm saying
I'd also just like to point out that during this whole thing, Charlie is still licking his fingers.
And this is where, I guess at some point, Dennis tries to chime in and Frank speaks for him. And Frank explains that, Dennis doesn't have to speak if he doesn't want to. And Dennis is kind of okay with it. He's like, wait, you know what? I don't want to argue with these guys. I'll just sit here and drink. And Frank gives him a little massage. So he's really falling into the role of like a pet, sort of a kept man.
Yeah, it's really like textbook manipulation, where it's like it starts with Frank is like kind of lording over him, but in a somewhat positive way, where he's like, you know what, if Dennis doesn't want it, like fighting his battles for him. And then he's like, oh, you don't want a beer, you want a vodka tonic because there's less calories. You got to keep that body tight and give him a massage. He's providing things for him.
He
at this
may
point.
be, no, he's not Dennising him, but there's a transition that he's going through. Like he's still being overpowering, but he's sort of defending it by saying, well, Dennis, you don't have to argue with them. Like, you don't have to do this. Whereas most people would want the ability to do that. And Frank is like posing it as his choice. Like, you don't have to respond. I'll do it for you. If you don't get your hands dirty. You have other things to worry about.
Let me get you a drink.
Let me do this. Let me do that. And we will see it change later on.
Yes. Next, we see the gangsters in their weird hideout lair. I'm not sure what to call it. What is that? What do you call that stuff on the wall where it's got that like, it's like fake wood
paneling.
Wood paneling,
big time.
Yeah, it's really like a distinct look. Their whole hideout is decked out in this. It still looks to me like a rec center, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those like Elks Hall, fraternity, Eagles fraternity, whatever, like where those old people, or VFW.
right, yeah.
It's like, a working class gentleman's club. Gentleman's club sounds wrong. It's a place where dudes hang out.
They're playing cards, eating deli meats. They're in the middle of some kind of argument. Lefty has a great line where he says, "I'm just trying to remain elegant over here."
He has some of the weirdest, greatest lines.
Yeah, what a real oddball in their mob. Mac enters wearing a tracksuit, trying to talk like them, saying like "use guys" and
These guys got the right idea with these. It's like the perfect mix of comfort and wind resistance.
his tracksuit looks a lot better than the other guys. It really fits him.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's brighter, I guess.
yeah, it's like a teal, like a baby blue. Believe someone asks him if it comes in a men's.
And his response is so funny.
Huh? I think this is men's. Yes, men's.
Which again, they're just trying to, harass. What do they call that? When you do it to like fraternities do it? Hazing?
Haze,
Yeah, I think they're like hazing him, basically.
They're hazing him with no intention of like moving him up in the ranks.
Right.
Johnny wants him to go wash his car, and Mac argues that he's being underutilized. And this is where he talks about being hard and exploding all over people.
Yeah.
Look, if you just give me a chance, I could show you how hard I actually am.
What?
Yeah, that's right. I'm so hard that people are scared of me, and they should be, because I'll explode all over them. Oh, come on. What's the matter?
And he says that he's got some brute force and he's got cat-like reflexes, which of course they take that and run with it.
Right. There's a lot of
Anthony
clawing motions like a cat.
Anthony comes up with the name Pussy Hands for him.
Well,
And his
Mac has a
pushback
lot
on
of
that-
he has a lot of suggestions with the way it could be. He's like cougar hands or jaguar hands, or he just starts listing other
powerful
big-
jungle cats.
big cats that would be more appropriate of a nickname. But they're like, no, we're gonna go with Pussy Hands. They're like, yeah, no, we're not gonna change it. And I think Lefty comes in with another great comment, very off the cuff, as he's looking at his hand at his cards, and he says,
He does have gorgeous hands, though.
Lefty is very cool.
yeah.
Next, we have Dee and Charlie taking Dennis's advice literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they head to Center City, Philadelphia to drum up some business.
I was going to ask you, is this actually Philadelphia?
It looks like it.
Yeah.
It really, it does look like Center City. It doesn't remind me of anything in LA.
It's not working. Everyone's just rushing by them.
Right.
Charlie's wearing a suit that I think we never see again. And he's got the classic Charlie tie, but so they're like, okay, what can we do to make this work? Charlie brings up the suggestion of going back to the country club.
Right. But they figure out the problem is that everyone's amped up. They're in business mode. I believe he says they're in fifth gear and we're stuck in first. So at Charlie's suggestion, they're going to do a little bit of coke just to bring them up to speed, and then it'll all happen.
Dee sticks her finger in the bag and is about to snort it. And Charlie says, no, that's how you become a drug addict. You gotta rub it on your gums.
Yeah. Which I don't understand that at all, but
It's something that even though little kids don't talk about doing blow, it sounds like a very naive, childish thing to be like,
right.
oh, that's how you become addicted, even though it's the same.
Right. You're still absorbing it.
The end result is the same. There's some really good back and forth with them about how Dee feels good, she feels weird, she feels good, she feels weird. While Dee is describing how she feels, I don't know if you noticed this, Charlie makes this sound with his teeth.
No.
He does this clicking sound, and this will only make sense to 10 people, but the sound that he makes is identical to the Slack desktop notification sound. It sounds exactly the same. Maybe I'll do an
A-B.
I'll do an A-B right here. It's identical.
I think I see what you mean, Charlie. I think I see.
Because I watched this for the first time yesterday, and that part happened, and I was like, oh, and I opened Slack, didn't see anything, and I rewound it, and I was like, oh, Charlie's they must have sampled this episode to get the sound. So anyways, Charlie's like, yeah, we just reapply every 10 or 15 minutes. That's what I've been doing.
Right. But this is when they run into little Matty Mara.
Yes. His second appearance.
Yep. It's crazy to think that it's only his second appearance.
I know.
He hasn't even begun his journey.
He starts his journey here.
So they see Matty Mara. He's in his priest uniform, although there are a couple of rips and tears here and there, so it doesn't look like it's great. It looks like he's holding a cup of coffee, which I think the cup is really interesting. I don't know if you noticed anything about it. It has like little indents or like, I don't know, there's something around the edges of it. It's just really interesting. I don't know if you'll ever go back and watch, but...
well, now I will. Now I'll go back to that spot and look at it.
I don't know. There's just like... something about the outside edges. You see like shadows, so it's not just like a smooth outside. Anyway, so they approach him. They're a little fired up. He is not stoked to see them, but they are stoked to see him. Yeah, they're excited that they let him back into the priesthood, you know? And as they're saying, you know, oh, that's so great, they let you back in, that's when a couple of guys that seem like regulars, you know, business guys that work at the building, they put a couple, you know, quarters and some change into his cup. And it slowly, you know, dawns on them that he's not back in the priesthood. He's just doing that as a costume, you know, to panhandle.
Yeah, that's his, like, hook.
Yeah.
With the people that walk around in that neighborhood is like...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's the Reverend.
Reverend, yeah.
Hey, man. How you doing, man? Hey, keep your head up, Reverend. Hey, keep the faith.
Bless you.
Yeah, so it either dawns on them or Matty Cricket admits that he is homeless. He's living on the streets. And then they bring up the street urchin thing. They keep calling him a street urchin, and he does not like that term, but it is a great phrase.
But they would buy drugs from a street urchin
You got
like
the
yourself.
street urchin thing going on now.
Please stop calling me a street urchin.
Well,
I'm not a street urchin.
Well, you know, you are what you are now.
What else happens here? How do they hit their hooks in him?
Well, Charlie pulls him aside and says, if you do this for me, I'll let you stay at Dee's house until you get back on your feet.
Right. And that's when he started this conversation being very apprehensive and didn't want anything to do with them because they did ruin his life, which actually Dee makes a funny comment. She's like, who, Charlie?
Yeah. She's not sure who he's talking about.
Yeah.
You.
It's like, yeah, obviously. And so when Charlie pulls him aside, he kind of turns around at this point and he's like, do you think she still likes me? Do you think I still have a chance? And it's sad.
Charlie's high. He's very convincing. I mean, if you were a homeless guy who was in love with a woman and her friend comes up to you and is like, you can go inside, you can stay indoors and at her house.
Right.
Just do this one little thing. You already know drug addicts, right? Because they attacked you.
Yeah, he was attacked by drug addicts.
Do you know them? Can you get in touch with them?
And I think the end of this scene, as they sort of realize this is going to happen, as it becomes a thing, Charlie, it's subtle on the way out, but Charlie reaches into his cup and says,
I gotta take a cup now, Cricket. We're working together.
It's so
and
good.
It's an amazing transition from, and it's kind of true as to how that happens when someone like works their way in and like becomes the person who's taking a cut. Yeah, Charlie does a really subtle, you know, he's got his arm around him, he takes him to the side, he's like, hey, you know, if you just do this little thing for us, you know, then you could stay at Dee's, you know, a warm bed, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, now I got it. You know, it's like that friendly transition when you realize like, oh, this person's being friendly to me, but they're not my friend.
Yeah.
Like this is
a business transaction.
Yeah.
A quick scene with Frank and Dennis. They arrive at a fancy restaurant. Frank has a chalice now.
Yes, he's got a sweet pimp chalice.
He's got a pimp chalice that looks very expensive. He's eating cereal out of it.
I gotta say, that is the coolest move, to show up to a restaurant with a pimp chalice full of cereal. I would love to do that.
There's a really great bit of dialogue where they talk about ass play.
This time, nothing with the ass, because that got really weird last time, all right?
What are you talking about?
You didn't set up that ass play on the last one?
No, I never set up any ass play.
Yeah, the acting in that little bit is so good. They're just trying to figure out, because Dennis had something done to his butt, and did Frank authorize this? And Frank says no, and you know, so Dennis is like, well, I should probably go get a doctor's opinion on this just to be safe.
Right. Which, I mean, and that's exactly what they wanted, but now I'm dying to know.
I know.
What
I know.
was it?
What was it? Did they stick a toy car up there?
Yeah, there must be something possibly up there, or, I mean, his butt must be different prior versus post.
This scene is basically just to keep the Frank and Dennis relationship moving, because Frank is just like, yeah, your date's over there. It's this crazy old lady.
Right. Is she putting on lipstick at some point, so you get a look close up of her like teeth and skin?
Yeah.
It's kind of gross. And, originally Dennis just wanted classy, rich, old women to like go out to dinner with, and, no banging, blah, blah, blah. But this is the progression of the dynamic, the relationship, and his job.
We're sliding downhill at this point.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think the ass play makes it pretty evident. Also, I just wanted to say or ask, if we did this podcast in person every week, do you think we would get pimp chalices?
It would be the obvious next step in the evolution.
That would be so fun if we could have like quirky, fun things like that,
Next, we see a great scene with Dee and Charlie at Dee's apartment.
Right.
She's doing the like Goodfellas, Ray Liotta, like peering out the window, like crazy paranoid, which I guess doing blow for however many days they've been doing it will make you extremely paranoid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think they gave Cricket their drugs to sell, and it's, I guess, the next day maybe, or like just a few hours later, and he hasn't checked in, and they're worried, and they're like, oh my God, did we just give a homeless dude a big bag of Coke and expect him to come back with a bunch of money? Like, that'll never happen.
Right.
So she's freaking out. She's pacing.
Charlie is having a very coke-fueled stream of consciousness dialogue, I guess, with Dee. She's not really paying attention.
Hypothetically speaking here, do you think you could teach a horse to sit on a bar stool and drink beer?
I don't know, Charlie, maybe.
And would you hypothetically pay really good money to see that?
And she's like, wait a second, are you still thinking about the horse?
The horse has been brought up a few times already at this point.
Do we know its name yet or no? No.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
So this is where we get both of their coke-fueled paranoia, whatever, is interrupted by a knock at the door, which, yeah, they're very concerned about. And I guess they're like, who's there? And he's like, it's Matthew, or, and they're like, what? Matthew Mara? And that's the moment where Dee makes the best face. She does this crazy shrug, and her mouth turns into like a bizarre frown. It looks like she's made of rubber.
It looks like she's in a wind tunnel. It's like,
yeah, like her whole face is like, it's like the hardest shrug ever. And yeah, so she demonstrates that she has zero recollection of who Matthew Mara could be.
Eventually, they figure, he announces that it's fine, it's Rickety Cricket. They're like, oh yeah, come on in. He is loving being in Dee's apartment from the second he walks through the door. He's got a couple bags.
All right. Look at this place. It's exactly as I imagined it would be.
He asks Charlie where he should put his stuff, and Charlie's like, trying to not draw attention to his stuff.
Making it subtle. Which I think Dee even says, like, why does he have his stuff? Like, what's going on? Why do you have bags?
Yeah. Cricket's like, does Dee have a dream catcher over her bed? He's like, he's got this whole fantasy in his mind about like what her apartment's like.
Yeah. He's thought about all the detail. He even goes into the fridge, and he's like looking through the fridge and finds Swiss, and he like announces, he's like, Swiss, I knew it. I knew. So creepy, but very endearing.
Yeah, he's cute. Dee and Charlie are like very, very worried about the cash.
Right.
Cricket is not even thinking about that at all. And they're like, dude, do you have the money? And he's like, oh yeah, sure, here. And just throws them this massive stack of cash.
Right.
And that's all it takes for these two degenerates.
Right. So yeah, it goes from them really, really concerned about the cash, but also Dee really concerned about what's going on with Maddie's bags. And then, once they get the cash, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. And yeah, so their plan is now they're like, well, if you flip this in an hour, like, we've still got a day. Oh, that's it. They say that they've got enough to pay back the mob. So somehow Cricket sold, I guess this is maybe retail versus wholesale. He sold that like small bag that they gave him.
Right.
And they say they can pay back the mob. And they say, but they have 24 hours. It's only Thursday.
24 whole hours.
And if Cricket could turn around that small bag in just a few hours this afternoon, imagine what he could do with a whole day. And
Yeah.
Cricket's like, no, I just want to go to sleep. I just want to take a nap. I just want to curl up in Dee's bed.
That
it's
teddy
like,
bear.
he just got to heaven. And they want him to go back out on the streets and deal with the drug addicts that almost stabbed him. He's not stoked, but Charlie has something for that.
Right. So this is the beginning. This is the genesis of Rickety Cricket's extreme downfall. I mean, he's already kicked out of the priesthood and homeless, but once they put that coke on Dee's finger and stick that finger in Cricket's mouth, it's all over. It's done.
Yeah. So he's resisting. They have him up against the fridge, and he just succumbs because, it's funny because it is Dee's finger. So I think there's something for him, obviously. It's hard to resist. So
yeah, of course.
he gets what we assume is his first taste of cocaine.
They have created a monster. I would also just like to point out that when they have him backed up against the refrigerator, Dee takes the Swiss cheese out of his hand and puts it on top of the refrigerator. Like, focus on what's important here.
That's weird, but that's funny. Like it's like taking a weapon away, or
Yeah.
I don't know. So we assume that plan is enacted.
Right. So I guess their plan is that they go back to bingo for like the fifth time.
Right. And get more coke.
Buy more coke. Yeah.
I mean, because he's still theoretically got the rest of their coke.
Next, we have Dennis and Frank, and just a quick note about Dennis's line about,
Where am I having dinner tonight, Frank? I'm kind of in the mood for Asian fusion.
I don't know why that's so funny to me, but I found that to be hilarious. One of the best lines of the episode.
Right. Yeah. So he's, I think this is in Dennis's apartment. He's getting ready, looking in the mirror, getting ready for his date. And that's when Frank tells him, no more dates, no more dinners.
We're going straight to banging from now on.
And he shows him an advertisement in like the local free newspaper.
Yeah.
It says body work by Dennis.
Yeah. And he's like, well, that makes me look like a whore. And yeah, that's the point. Frank says, yeah, you are a whore. What's the problem?
And then Frank, being manipulative again, says that you can still have your rules. And Dennis points out the ad says no rules.
And that's when they zoom in on the ad. Yeah, literally at the bottom says no rules. Is that the point at which Dennis says he's out? He's done?
Yeah. It's gone too far for him.
But as a proper pimp, Frank won't let it happen. So he gives him is that when he gives him a swift backhand?
Ow! What the hell, dude? I'm knocking some sense into you, Dennis. This is all you got.
The scene gets creepy, too, at this point. This is when they use the mirror to great effect. And that's when Frank basically starts turning this like classic manipulative sort of relationship into like the next phase, where he starts saying how he cares about him and he's trying to take care of him. And he's like, you got to do right by me. You're my one and only. You're my everything.
Yeah, it's super dark.
And then he says, and also don't make me hit you. I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt you, baby. It's very, very disturbing. It's very creepy, and it's a true thing that happens, and it's dark. In this context, it's humorous because it's Frank and his son, but it's
right.
I mean, and they're characters, and it's fake, but it's a woof. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a creepy scene. Also, there's one point where Frank starts pointing at either Dennis or the newspaper, and he has his pinky out, and he's got like rings now, and it's just a funny thing where he points with his pinky out. He's like showing off his ring.
So this would probably be a good point to just backtrack for a second and bring up that at the beginning of the first episode, Frank wanted nothing to do with any of this paying back the mob stuff.
And he still doesn't.
But he's fallen so hard into this pimp role that he is having a blast doing, that he's slapping his son around, getting his son. He has made quite a turnaround. As far as involvement goes.
Right. He's only got a few years left. He's going to get weird with it.
Exactly.
And going full pimp is one of those things.
Apparently. So then we see Dee and Charlie. I'm guessing this is the next day? Or is this the same day? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it really doesn't.
It's later. So apparently Cricket hasn't checked in, and they are very concerned, and they're very high, and they're very paranoid.
Yeah.
And they're like frantically walking down the street in some maybe not great part of Philly.
Yeah, this actually does look like. I mean, there are a few places it could be, but it really does look like North Philly, like the place that was like ground zero for drug dealing in Philadelphia.
Right.
Like a crazy nexus of the whatever. It looks like one of those sketchy places. There are like row homes, but there's like huge gaps where there's like 6 houses that either were knocked down or never built or whatever. So yeah, sketchy neighborhood.
It looks like the same neighborhood when Dennis and Dee are on crack.
Yep, exactly.
And like the dog is eating a sandwich out of Dennis's hand or whatever. Yeah. Looks like the same spot.
Well, yeah, and then that's when they pull up in the limo.
Right. So it's revealed while Dee and Charlie are panicking on the street that Charlie's wearing horse riding pants.
What's with the pants?
Oh, these things? These are horse riding pants.
Charlie, you can't get a horse.
Why not?
Because it's crazy.
So he obviously hasn't dropped this horse thing.
No, that's all he thinks about.
Dee is telling him that it's crazy, and he's like, "Oh, really? Is it crazy? Is that?"
Oh, I'm sorry. Isn't it crazier than having a dog that bites or sheds or a cat that poops in a box while it's biting you?
That's pretty good.
I think Dee goes like, what does she say? She says she has like some funny retort, like while it's pooping or something like that. It's
right.
One of those like great always sunny moments where like the little ad lib line is the funniest bit that they obviously just like threw in.
Right. And I do appreciate this because it's funny when you could describe owning an animal as a crazy experience. Like we've normalized it and it is normal, and it's great and it's very rewarding, right. But it is also funny, like from the perspective of someone who doesn't like dogs or cats, for them to describe the relationship and the scenarios that happen.
It's like you pick up their poop put it in a bag.
You put a bag over your hand and you grab their poop with your hand. Like if you had to do that to your own poop, you would be like retching and vomiting and it would be the grossest thing you've ever. But like for a dog, it's fine. You like think about how cute their poop is. Like
do it several times a day.
And yeah, in your kitchen or in your bathroom, you have a box of sand where your cat just shits and pisses, and it's just in the house all the time. It's a very strange scenario. And
they know what to do. They're trained to like do that, and it's normal for everyone involved.
Yeah, so why not have a horse at the bar?
So they find Cricket, who has changed his look a little bit. He has still got his jacket, but he's not wearing a shirt
or pants
underneath, or pants. His nose is bleeding. He's banging on some trash cans.
Yeah,
and they're like, "Where's the drugs?" And he's like, "Oh, I sold them all." Like, okay, where's the money? And he's like,
Spent the money on these sweet ass kettle drums. Look at these.
They point out that his kettle drums are actually upside down trash cans, and he proves that they're not by saying,
"Oh, these are trash cans? Then why do they sound like this?"
He's very excited. He's writing a musical.
Yes,
that's why he needed the kettle drums. Oh, he also says he didn't use all of it. He didn't use all of it to buy the kettle drums because he admits that he did some of it. And they're like,
I did a little bit.
Obviously. Because he's like freaking out and jumping and talking about his musical.
Archangel comes down, has to live on the street and fight crime.
Yep. Going to get higher and higher.
He does say at the end that he does have some of the drugs left, and so Dee and Charlie just like snatch it out of his hand, and
right. But he wants to make sure they leave him some because he's still writing the 7th act.
Exactly. It's all up in his head right now, so he needs that like little boost.
Yeah.
The saga of Dennis and Frank continues to get darker and darker. They are in some like shitty motel.
Oh God, yeah.
There's a woman sitting on the bed, and Frank is telling her about like the rates, like $250 for the first hour, blah blah blah, and then he says like,
and $150 every hour after that, unless you want him to act like he's enjoying it. Then it's a little extra.
He hits play on a boombox, which plays Two of Hearts by Stacey Q, a real serious banger.
Right. Do we hear this a lot? It sounds so familiar. Or is it? Or am I just familiar with the song otherwise?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's in another episode. But yeah, as soon as he started playing it, I was like, Two of Hearts. Like I knew what song it was, just with the like weird sample thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
I need you. Yeah.
We'll figure that out. We'll see if it comes back. But yeah, that's when Dennis comes in and is obviously either miserable or drunk and numbing the pain. He does a little
Yeah.
striptease, and it's, very half-assed.
Extremely half-assed. Frank reminds the lady that if she's into ass play, he'll do anything with the ass.
I think, yeah, at that point, does Dennis have a reaction? But it's like,
Yeah, he just stares daggers.
yeah, it just seems like, yeah, he's numb to it. He
Right.
might be on something, but yeah, it's a very almost like realistic depiction maybe of how that happens, like how someone gets
Right.
manipulated and is like, oh, this is fun. It's all like high class, and I don't, blah blah blah, and then it just like falls. It's like a downward spiral.
After the motel, we see Mac cleaning a urinal in the
Oh, right, yeah.
gangster hideout, doing some Charlie work. He notices that Don Sal, which we haven't seen until now,
He's the boss,
is-
I guess.
he's the boss. He's the Don. He's in the bathroom, and Mac is pleading with him, telling him he's not being utilized properly. He just wants to do some gangster shit.
Yeah, and I guess Sal seems pretty annoyed by him, but he's like, you know what? I do have something for you. He's like, I want you to go to my house and take care of my wife. And Mac misinterprets this a few times.
You mean the grubber out?
No!
You want me to bang her? Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah, they just keep making him do the Charlie work, and he is not stoked. No gangster shit for him.
And through the window, we can see Dennis doing a bit of a striptease for Don Sal's wife. And Dennis has a funny line where he says,
Like that, huh? Get what you want.
Just keep dancing, whore.
it's just like he's just dancing horribly. It's really funny. Matt can see him through the window, and he's like, Dennis, let's go talk right now.
Yeah, so they meet in the lobby of this super nice mansion, and they have a little bit of an argument. Max says, yo, you can't have sex with her. That's like the mob boss's wife. Like, you'll definitely get killed. And I forget how he phrases it, but somehow he phrases it like you can't have sex with her, like you can't do it. And Dennis explains, like, no, you have to remove yourself. You have to completely detach. And you could just sort of see the empty shell that Dennis has become.
Right.
That Frank has trained him, into.
The only thing that matters is cash or something like that.
Yeah, he's like, you got to keep your eye on the prize. It's all about the cash. And that's
fully brainwashed.
yeah, just like a different human, or a non-human. And that's when Frank comes in and argues. He's like, Mac, get out of here. He's like, you're ruining my deal. Then they have a nice little slapping war.
Stay now! Stay! Wait, you're gonna get us killed! Stop!
I think that's how it ends, right? We just cut away.
No, Don Sal's wife comes down the stairs.
Oh, right.
And she tells the whore to get back upstairs. And finally, Dennis, he's got the shit slapped out of him, so I guess he's coming to, and he's like, no. And
Right.
he bails.
Right.
Don Sal's wife says, what about you, pussy hands? And there's an amazing Mac line where he says,
Oh, no, I would never sleep with you. You're gross.
Yeah, that is such a good line. I can't believe I forgot about that. Yeah, Dennis somehow gets snapped out of it, and then Mac delivers his line. Okay, so we see no one sleeping. Also, I went through a deep dive on Karen James, but maybe we should get to it later.
I mean, we can do it now.
Okay.
It's time for Deep Dive with Will Noon.
Yeah, so Karen James is the mob boss's wife. She was in a bunch of random stuff, and she was also like a casting, like director or casting assistant for also many, many years. One of the things that I thought was pretty funny, she was in an episode of Santa Barbara, which was like a soap opera that ran for 10 years that I've never heard of.
Never heard of it.
It was like on after like Days of Our Lives at 3 p.m. like weekdays, and it ran for 10 years and has like a bunch of daytime Emmys and blah blah blah, and I'd literally never heard of it. It was like the crazy. She just had like a one scene, which I thought was funny. Her character was Blue Bikini Girl. So, and then she was more recently. She was still in a bunch of stuff recently, but like again, like one-offs. She was in a show. Have you ever heard of a show called Swedish Dicks?
No.
Oh, there's a show called Swedish Dicks, and she was in an episode of it. It's had 2 seasons. I think it's on like the Pop Network, which I've never heard of. It wasn't on Hulu or Netflix, so I couldn't watch it, but I watched a preview. Do you know Peter Stormare?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like the crazy big goof dude from like Big Lebowski and Fargo.
Right.
He's in
he's
it.
He's like a thug.
Yeah, he's one of the main
Quote, unquote.
characters. And his co-star is like some newer Swedish guy.
Yeah.
But also, Keanu Reeves is in a bunch of episodes. Like, he's like a regular in this show.
How have I never heard of this?
That's what I'm saying. It's like, it was the weirdest thing. Also, what I thought was very interesting, I think it's maybe a reoccurring character, but Tracy Lords is in the show.
Interesting.
Do you know anything about her?
Yeah, sort of. Wasn't she a porn star?
Yes.
That transitioned to acting.
Yeah, she has apparently an amazing, like, she was in a bunch of stuff that I'd heard of, like, but I'd never noticed or known who she was in those. But I was just reading the Wikipedia. It was just like a deep dive. She used a fake ID to start doing porn when she was 16.
Uh-oh.
And she was apparently like the biggest star and won like awards. And, you know, at some point, with like a year and a half into her career, she was like literally the biggest porn star at the time. She started a production company, like blah, blah, blah. They were like making their own films. And I think she only made one film like a few days after she actually turned 18. And that was like the week that like the feds found out, got tipped off, or finally executed on it. And
holy shit,
everything got shut down. And I guess this is like the late 80s. So like stores had her films on their shelves and it was fucking child pornography. And everyone was like scrambling to pull it off shelves and this, that, and the other. So there's like hundreds of movies that she made in those 2 years, like the most famous porn star. And there's only like one film that she made that's like actually legally available or something. And it's insane. I really want to read her book. And anyway, so within a few years, she like went to like some acting school, like in some theater company acting school, and like totally transitioned and turned it around. Then wrote like a really big, memoir. And yeah, she's in a show called Swedish Dicks with Peter Stormare and Keanu Reeves.
Interesting. Wild stories.
Yeah. And it's all thanks to Karen James.
Thank you, Don Sal's wife.
Anyway, I believe at this point, we're going to go back to the bar. And I think Dee and Charlie are trying to salvage this situation because now they've got no time. It's Friday. The mob is coming. They had the money. They spent it on more drugs. They tried to flip it, but it didn't work out. So now they've got just the little bit that Cricket saved for his seventh act. So they're cutting it with flour.
Right. Well, they're also doing like just one more.
Right.
Like
so they've
sticking their fingers in it.
Yeah. So they've been like, they've been getting high on their own supply. And I thought that this moment where Charlie's like, okay, I'm just going to cut a little bit. You're not even going to notice it. Just enough. This feels realistic. I feel like anytime I try to pour flour, this is kind of what happens. But basically, he dumps the entire bag of flour on this tiny pile of cocaine on the scale.
That's too much. That's too much. Okay.
Oh, God, they're going to kill us. No, we're dead.
I felt like, yeah, that's like me cooking. Like, if I'm not careful, flour just moves in a weird way. So I get it. I don't blame him.
Yeah. Flour's a lot like cocaine in that it's weightless.
Right. It's very hard to control.
So yeah, it's like, okay, shit, now what do we do? Charlie suggests that they just skip town.
Right. And
just going to be me, you, and Peter Nincompoop.
And yeah, Dee is getting on board. She's like, okay, yeah, we'll go to the mountains. We'll do this. But then she's like, wait a second, who the fuck is Peter Nincompoop?
Peter Nincompoop is the name of the horse, and Charlie takes her out back behind the bar and shows her the horse.
So Charlie stole the horse, and she is freaking out. She's like, what? How did you get it here? And he's like, I wrote it. So Charlie really does have a relationship with this horse. They are soulmates of some kind.
They have a connection.
Yeah. So Charlie explains that they're going to ride to the mountains, which we assume, I don't know, the Poconos.
Right. The Poconos.
Yeah. So they're going to go on Peter Nincompoop. And, Charlie's going to ride and Dee's going to ride on the back and they're going to, just go. Dee doesn't like this idea. I think she's probably scared of riding on a horse. Because Charlie doesn't know what he's doing and they're riding bareback and blah, blah, blah.
And it would look pretty obvious.
But she rationalizes it by saying that people would see us. So she says you got to do it in a car. And
right.
Charlie seems, after all his obsession with Peter, he seems to get convinced pretty easily. So
yeah, it's pretty instantaneous.
A sentence or two, and then he's like, okay, you're right. Oh, you know what? He does realize that maybe Peter Nincompoop would be better on his own. I think that's what it is. He's doing it for the benefit of Peter. So yeah,
because they're in a dangerous situation. You know, you got to think about Peter Nincompoop's safety.
Right. The mob would have no issue killing a horse.
Right.
They'd probably be like, sweet, we get a horse head. Now we can put it in someone's bed. So yeah. So Charlie shoos Peter Nincompoop away. I also thought it was funny that Peter Nincompoop wasn't tied up in the alley.
No, just chilling.
But he was like waiting for Charlie.
Yeah.
And that's how we know that Peter feels the same way.
Yeah, speaks to the bond that they share. So they go back into the office and Charlie starts eating flour and Dee's like, what are you doing? Like, well, we gotta stay sharp.
It's just mostly flour.
I know, but if we do enough of it, it should still work, right?
Oh, then let's do a lot of it.
Yeah, if the ratio is 20-1, you just have to do 20 times more. So they're both eating handfuls of flour. Which is like pretty good acting, because how miserable would that be if you put maybe they're good actors and they're faking it. Maybe they keep their mouths closed and they just wipe it on their face. Like a Cookie Monster vibe.
Right. Well, we do know that it is all over their faces by the end of it. Cricket is in the bar. He's keeping it sexy with the kettle drums, hips and nips. He's just lost his mind.
Right, hips and nips.
He's just crazy high.
He's in it, and he comes up with what?
Rise up, gonna get higher and higher. Woo!
That's his hook that he comes up with, and it's pretty good. He's doing a good job. He's very happy with himself.
Frank and Mac walk in. Frank has his gun ready to go. I'm not sure what they're talking about when they come in, but I guess since they met up
I think they might be just warning everyone. Yeah, I think they come in and they're like, yo, the thing's about to go down.
Dee and Charlie make an amazing entrance. This is one of my favorite parts of this episode. They have flour all over their faces.
How you guys doing?
We're good. We're very good.
Oh, things are fine.
You guys look like you're doing really well.
Yeah, they're all fired up. And then I guess Dee sees Frank's gun, and Frank and Mac explain the situation, that not only is the mob coming back for their money or their drugs, but also they may have, offended or something, the mob boss's wife. So Dee's like, okay, yeah, no problem. And she pulls out her gun.
She's like, I went back to bingo and got a gun. And Charlie's like, okay, cool. Well, now that I see yours, I can pull out mine. He pulls out this gigantic revolver out of his horse riding pants.
Yeah, I think he says he's been carrying this thing around all day.
So this is where they come up with their game plan. Like, Frank's like, I'm going to reach for a pack of cigarettes. When I ask for a light, we come out guns blazing. Dee's like, I'm going to go tie my shoe.
Right.
And I'll be ready to go. Dee's rubber face is going crazy in this scene too. Her eyes are just popping out of her head. The flour all over the face makes a nice little effect.
Oh my God, very comical.
So the mob walks in. Don Sal says, use guys again. I guess, I don't know what their initial plan was, but they ended up just pulling the guns like immediately.
Right. And then the mob pulls all their guns. So it's just a lot of like AOs and like swinging guns around.
Dennis makes an amazing entrance, and then, of course, gets every gun pointed at him as well, and he's freaking out.
Right.
So he's like, hey, I got the cash. I got the cash.
Right. So he's got a Ziploc bag full of money.
I thought that was an interesting presentation in a Ziploc bag, but
yeah, it's weird.
I don't know. So they're like, how did you do that? And he tells them that he
sold Frank's pimp chalice.
What?
That's right, you son of a bitch. Thanks for bailing us out, just like always.
God damn it.
Can we assume that he went to bingo to sell it?
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption.
Right.
Bingo has been in constant contact with the gang.
Yeah, and okay, so the first score that Cricket sold, like that, the money that he came back, they said they could pay off the mob. So that was 25 grand or more. And they sent that back to get more drugs. So in theory, Bingo had the cash from Charlie and Dee.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when Dennis showed up with the pimp chalice, he had the 25 grand ready to go.
It's like Patty's bucks. It's this self-sustaining.
It's a circular economy.
Yeah. And so then there's like a funny interaction with the mob and the gang where they're talking about, "Oof, that was close."
Yeah.
And then Johnny says, "Got pretty tense there." And Mac's like,
Tense is an excellent word for what happened.
It was nice doing business.
as they're leaving, Don Sal gets a call on his phone, and he's like, "Hang on a second. My wife just said that one of Pussy Hands' friends tried to force himself
Right.
on my wife."
And I guess, yeah, Mac thinks that the best thing to do is to like say, no, that's not true. He didn't do that.
Right.
And then he's like, oh, okay, well then it must have been you. He's like, oh. He's like, oh, wait a second, that's even worse. And then one by one, I think, or maybe in the background, Cricket is like, gotta keep it sexy. Oh my God, I done it. I did it. I achieved maximum sexiness.
Yeah, it's like banging drums during this whole interaction between them at the end, and then Cricket's just exactly what you just said. Like, I made it so sexy.
Yeah, so I guess he maybe finally figured out that seventh act, and so he made it so sexy. It's all hips and nips, and one by one, the gang just like, oh, they realize the opportunity, so they like point, and like all down the line, they eventually point at Cricket. And the mob, they just take that for face value, and they say, sure, okay, Cricket's the one.
Yeah. Obviously, this homeless priest is the one who did that.
Who forced himself
banging on trash cans in the bar, right?
So, so they go and pick him up literally and carry him out of the bar. And he's still singing, talking about how sexy it is.
He asks if they have more blow.
Right.
And so the gang's like, okay, well, who wants a beer? Let's do some shots.
Right.
They learned absolutely nothing. If anything, things just got much darker in their world. Mm-hmm. And that's the end of the episode, except for a little bit of an epilogue with Cricket. His legs have been broken. He's banging on the drum, singing about how he's not in pain because he can't feel anything because he found more cocaine. And a beautiful white horse named Peter Nincompoop
gallops
runs.
By.
Yeah, gallops by.
In that North Philly spot, which is actually kind of funny because there's, I used to live in Philadelphia, if somehow people don't know that.
I thought the last shot was in Center City, like downtown.
Oh, was it? I'm just picturing him in the initial scene.
Right. Yeah, I think it's like where they first met him.
Right.
But anyways, you used to live in Philadelphia.
He must be back to busking, not creating art. So the funny thing about the horse is that I used to live in Philly, like just north of downtown, but or Center City, and I would occasionally hear horses gallop past my house, like
interesting
on the street, and I definitely lived like in the city proper. I had the elevated subway, which we call the L, ran down my street like 15 feet from my bedroom window.
It sounded like it was 2 feet outside your window.
Well, it's very loud. It's very, very loud.
It's very loud, folks.
Yeah. So Front Street. And apparently there's this thing with like Philly urban cowboys. There was like, I think it's like a program where they teach like inner city kids to ride horses. And there's like a stable that's in like North Philly. It's like just the weirdest, unexpected thing, but it's like a tradition. And it's very strange to hear the L go by 1 minute and then a horse clomp by the next minute.
Like looking at your watch, like it's still 2000 whatever. It's not.
Yeah. It's not like the 1850s and the Pony Express is coming through. So maybe there's some history there, but I don't think it relates.
Maybe that's where they sourced the horse.
Ooh, yeah. That's possible. Philadelphia Urban Cowboys.
Cool. Well, that's it for this episode. As I said last week, I am giving the combined 2 episodes a grade of A+. I loved it. I love the gangsters. Rickety Cricket beginning his downfall. Mm-hmm. Frank being a pimp. Charlie and Dee being high on cocaine most of the time. Right. A+ all around.
Some great visual physical comedy from Charlie and Dee. A great tag team, as always.
Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we are on Twitter at alwaysstockholm and on Instagram at always_Stockholm.
And be sure to like, subscribe, review, rate, do whatever. I don't know how this stuff works.
You're doing great, bud.
Cool. And yeah, we'll see you next time for episode 14 of season 3.
Brought to you by the Natty and Noon Network.